Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Alex and welcome to US Armed Updates. Wait, don't skip this video. The next few minutes could change everything for gun owners across this entire country. What I'm about to show you is something that Congress just put in writing, something that could fundamentally dismantle a nearly century-old gun control system. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this could be the biggest shift in federal firearms law since 1934. Gun owners across America need to hear this now. And the mainstream media? They're completely ignoring it. So stick with me because what's happening right now is absolutely massive. And if you're new here, welcome to US Armed Updates, your trusted source for Second Amendment law breakdowns, Supreme Court rulings, and real pro-freedom updates you won't hear anywhere else. All right, so let's get right into this because time is critical here. On a date that should matter to every single gun owner in this country, multiple members of Congress sent official letters directly to Attorney General Pam Bondi. And these aren't just casual suggestions or political talking points. These letters are formal congressional correspondence urging the Department of Justice to take an unprecedented position on the National Firearms Act. I'm talking about a position that could eliminate registration requirements for suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns. I have the actual letters right here, and what they say is absolutely groundbreaking. Stay with us until the end, because this affects every single person watching this video, whether you own NFA items or not. Now, before we dive deeper into what Congress is demanding and why this matters so much, I want you to understand the foundation of what we're dealing with here. For almost 100 years, the National Firearms Act has been the primary federal framework controlling certain categories of firearms. And the way it's always worked is this. The NFA tied two things together inseparably. First, it imposed a tax on certain arms, $200 for items like suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, and second, it created a registration and transfer system that was supposedly designed to enforce that tax. That's the key right there. The registration system was justified constitutionally because it was connected to tax collection. The Supreme Court actually confirmed this back in 1937 in a case called Sunzinski v. United States. The court said Congress can require registration because it's tied to collecting a tax. That was the legal foundation. That was the justification for nearly a century of federal gun registration. But here's where everything changes. Earlier this year, President Trump signed into law the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And buried inside that massive piece of legislation was Section 70436. This section did something that nobody in the gun control lobby saw coming. It set the NFA excise tax on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns to zero. Not reduced. Zero. No tax whatsoever. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's great. We don't have to pay $200 anymore. But this goes so much deeper than just saving money. I promise you, this part is critical, so pay very close attention to what I'm about to explain. If the tax is gone, if there's literally no tax to collect, then what exactly is the constitutional basis for the registration system? Think about it logically. The entire legal justification for forcing Americans to register these items with the federal government was that registration helped enforce tax collection. But if there's no tax, there's nothing to enforce. The foundation crumbles. And that's not just my interpretation. That's what Congress is now officially telling the Department of Justice. These letters spell it out in black and white. The members of Congress who actually helped draft Section 70436, the people who wrote this into law, are now saying their intent was crystal clear from the beginning. Repealing the tax also repeals the registration and transfer requirements. This isn't some creative legal theory. This is Congress stating their legislative intent on the record. Let me read you the opening paragraph from these letters, because you deserve to know exactly what was said. It reads, "Dear Attorney General Bondi, we write to inform the Department of Justice of Congress's position and intent regarding ongoing litigation challenging the National Firearms Act registration and transfer requirements for non-taxed NFA firearms. Following the enactment of President Trump's landmark Second Amendment victory in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, in enacting this bill into law, Congress affirmed its position that the taxation and registration provisions of the National Firearms Act are inseparably linked, and it expresses its intent to repeal the NFA's registration and transfer requirements by eliminating the associated taxes on certain firearms and silencers. Therefore, we urge the Department of Justice to adopt and advance Congress's stated position in all litigation concerning these provisions to ensure that congressional intent is accurately represented and upheld before the courts. Do you understand how enormous this is? Congress isn't hinting. They're not being subtle. They are explicitly telling the DOJ that the registration system cannot legally stand without the tax that justified it. And here's something that makes this even more powerful. Legislative intent matters tremendously in federal litigation. When courts are interpreting statutes, when the ATF is creating regulations, when the DOJ is deciding its legal positions, congressional intent is a massive factor. Agencies and courts constantly reference what Congress meant when they passed a law. So when Congress comes out this directly and says, "This was our intent, registration must go," that carries serious legal weight. Now, let's talk about who signed these letters because that matters too. We're not talking about a handful of fringe representatives. This is a coordinated effort from multiple members of Congress who worked on this legislation. These are the people who know exactly what they were trying to accomplish when they wrote Section 70436 into law, and they're not backing down. They're putting their names on official correspondence to the Attorney General saying, "Follow our intent, don't fight it." But here's where this gets even more intense, and this is the hidden angle that nobody else is talking about. Congress didn't just explain their interpretation and leave it at that. They went further. They are actively urging the Department of Justice to adopt this position in all ongoing litigation. Let me say that again. Congress is telling the DOJ, when you're faced with lawsuits challenging NFA registration, we don't want you to oppose those lawsuits. We want you to side with the challengers. We want you to agree that registration can't stand without the tax. This is Congress essentially giving the DOJ permission, actually more than permission. They're giving them a directive to stop defending this portion of the NFA in court. And guess what? There are major lawsuits happening right now that challenge exactly this issue. Gun Owners of America has a lawsuit. Multiple Second Amendment organizations have cases working through the federal courts right now targeting NFA registration requirements. And what Congress is saying to the DOJ is, don't fight these cases, support them, adopt our interpretation, and help end this unconstitutional registration scheme. I really read every single comment, and I know some of you are probably thinking, okay, but will the DOJ actually listen? That's the billion-dollar question. And that's what makes this moment so critical. Right now, the ball is entirely in Attorney General Pam Bondi's court. She has a decision to make. The DOJ can do one of two things. They can issue formal guidance stating that registration requirements no longer apply to zero-tax NFA items. That would be a historic rollback of federal gun control, the first major dismantling of the NFA since it was passed in 1934. Or the DOJ can ignore Congress, fight this interpretation in court, and argue that registration still applies even without a tax. If they choose that path, we're looking at one of the biggest Second Amendment legal battles in modern American history. And I'm not being dramatic. This would be a direct confrontation between congressional intent and executive branch enforcement. Courts would have to decide, does the NFA's registration system survive without the tax? Can the federal government force Americans to register items when there's no constitutional basis for that registration? Let's talk about who this affects because I want to make sure everybody understands the scale here. This isn't just about people who already own suppressors or short-barreled rifles. This affects every single American who values the Second Amendment. If registration falls for these items, it sets a precedent. It establishes that the federal government cannot maintain gun registration schemes without a valid constitutional justification. And that principle could extend to future battles over universal registration, gun databases, and other control measures that anti-gun politicians keep pushing. This is a turning point for gun owners. They didn't expect this to happen. And here's something else you need to consider. Congress also reminds Attorney General Bondi in these letters that President Trump signed this law with the explicit intention of expanding Second Amendment freedoms. They reference what they call the strongest pro-Second Amendment presidential legacy in history. This is political pressure being applied at the highest levels. Congress is essentially saying you have an opportunity here to uphold the president's legacy, to side with freedom, to stop defending unconstitutional restrictions. Don't hesitate. The choice is yours. Now, I want to give you my expert interpretation on where this is headed, because I've been following Second Amendment litigation for years, and I can tell you this is not normal. It is extremely rare for Congress to send letters like this to the DOJ about ongoing litigation. It shows how serious they are about making sure their intent is followed, and it also shows how vulnerable the current NFA registration system really is. If the DOJ sides with Congress, we could see suppressors, SBRs, and SBSs treated more like regular firearms. No more registration, no more wait times, no more sending your fingerprints to the federal government just to exercise a constitutional right. You'd still need to follow state laws, obviously, but the federal registration nightmare would be over for these items. But if the DOJ refuses, if they dig in and fight this, then we're going to court. And honestly, I think gun rights organizations are ready for that fight. They've been preparing for this. They have cases teed up. They have plaintiffs ready. And now they have Congress on the record saying the registration system was never meant to survive without the tax. That's a powerful argument to bring before a federal judge. This fight is far from over, but the momentum is absolutely on our side right now. I also want you to think about the broader implications here. For decades, gun control advocates have used the NFA as a model for what they want to do nationwide. They love registration. They love making law-abiding gun owners jump through hoops, pay fees, wait months, and register their property with the government. But if the NFA registration system collapses for these items, it destroys their blueprint. It shows that these schemes can be defeated. It proves that when we fight back legally and legislatively, we can win. You deserve to know this. You deserve to understand that your activism, your support for Second Amendment organizations, your votes, they're making a difference. So what happens next? Well, all eyes are on the Department of Justice now. Attorney General Bondi will have to decide how the DOJ is going to respond to Congress's directive. Will they issue guidance? Will they change their litigation strategy? Will they fight back? We're going to be watching this very closely, and I'm going to keep you updated every single step of the way. This is one of the most significant developments in federal gun law that we've seen in our lifetimes, and it's happening right now. Not in some distant future, right now. Thank you for being here. Your support strengthens this movement. Every view, every like, every comment sends a message that Americans care about their Second Amendment rights. We're not backing down, we're not giving up, and we're not going to let the media ignore stories like this. If you found this video valuable, if you learned something you didn't know before, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think the DOJ should do. Should they follow Congress's directive and end registration, or do you think they're going to fight this in court? I want to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is going to develop fast and you're not going to want to miss the next update. We're going to be covering every move the DOJ makes, every court filing, every development as this unfolds. This is history in the making and you're watching it happen in real time. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next video.